Hello everyone, welcome to this new video in this series. In this video we're going to set up all of the basics for combat. This will be quite a long video, so I'll make sure to have timestamps in the description. So here we are back in our scene, and yeah, we're going to be setting up combat. So there's quite a lot to do here, and I'll be fair, it's quite the elaborate setup. Now a couple of things might be slightly different depending on what animations you're using. The actions, instructions of Game Creator will all be the same. Your timings, however, might be slightly different. It might look a bit different, but you can use any animations you want for this, as long as they're still sword and shield, because that is kind of the primary focus here. However, the timings, if you use different animations, you know, it might be slightly different, but yeah, you'll have to slightly adjust that. So I'm using a Paladin animation pack. Link is in the description. This is not a cheap pack. I'm not even saying it's the best pack. I have the pack and that's why I'm using it. So if you want to go for simpler animations, in the first video I mentioned Kevin Iglesias, absolutely incredible. There's a melee warrior one which has you know, really good animations as well. It's one of them with sword and shield. But yeah, I'm going for the Paladin one because it's slightly more elaborate. I just love them. Cool finishers, buffs, the whole thing, equip animations. It's really nice. Again, there's so many other packs you could be using instead, depending on what you want to do with the game as well. Do you want it to be slower paced, faster paced? You know, that's all up to you. So one of the things before we even get started that I would like to address, when it comes to the animations, you know, hit animations, make sure loop is off and root motion on XZ is off. All of the walk movement animations, exactly the same thing. Need to make sure that root motion here is off. Now for walk and idle animations, loop of course has to be turned on. But yeah, other than that, basically this needs to be turned off. Now there are in place animations as well. However, they're weird. I get some really strange results when trying to use these, so I'm not really sure. And yeah, the root motion one, so the, you know, the non in place, you can just turn off root motion on XZ. So that's what I decided to do instead. This will go for pretty much any animation pack you're using. You'll need to turn that off. I'm not going to go through that again, just as a heads up, make sure you have that. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So yeah, that's it for the animations. Again, you can use whatever you want. Mixamo even has great free animations that are also sword and shield, so if you don't want to spend any money, you can go on to Mixamo and get those as well. They actually have tons of free animations and are pretty much all sword and shield focused, so those would be nice matches as well if you don't want to spend any money and don't have anything. Cool. So yeah, it's time to get started with our video. So first things first, we're going to create a new folder, and let's create this right here. 06 combat. Everything will be housed here. Now, just to be clear, we're not setting up the entire combat system. That will take multiple videos. We're going to set up the basics so that you know, we have our animation set, we have our camera, we have our targeting system, and we have everything we need as well for you know, our inventory system. So that actually works with our inventory system, so it's actually a complete basic system. So now first things first, in our combat, let's create a folder here, which will be sword shield. I'll just call it that. Now, just like in Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, and for example, Assassin's Creed Origins, the shield will always be visible. You can swap them, of course, with different looks, but you can never actually unequip the shield. Same for the weapon. You always need to have a weapon. That's how these games are set up. And there's a couple of reasons for that, because it becomes quite difficult if you have the ability to literally take away that shield. So it will always, there needs to be one, which will require some changes in our inventory as well. Small changes though, so really simple to do. Anyway, let's continue. So we have our folder, but before we do anything, I would like to set up all of the variables we're going to be using. Yes, obviously I've done this before, so I know exactly which, let's do this, combat global, there we go. And these will be, all of the variables will be, well, pretty much all the variables we'll be using for this video. So first of all is archetype, and then we'll give that a string, archetype, and then sword shield. There we go. Now archetype refers to what weapon class are we using. So are we using sword shield? Are we going to be using heavy weapons? Are we going to be using dual swords, for example, dual blades? So we need to set the archetype somewhere. In this video we'll only set up the sword shield. However, you can obviously set up multiple archetypes, and that's why we're doing this, because we'll be setting up an additional one, just the one, just to show you how it works. But yeah, we need the foundation there as well. Then we're going to set up some game objects. So this will be melee weapon. There we go. And this will be melee shield. Then we're going to have a bool, melee shield visual. Now I'm adding the visual because you can't literally have the same names, so that's the reason. We also have melee sword visual, and then let's duplicate both, and we'll call these this inventory, and inventory as well. There we go. So yeah, the important thing to note here is that all of these bools, basically these four, are just for the visual side of things. So that's why they're called visual. So when we have equipment on our back, and then we're going to draw it in combat, so this will handle, well, you'll see in a bit, but this will handle how that will visually play out, because we're not literally taking those things from our back. We're timing it well so that it looks like we're doing that. So yeah, those are all of our main variables. Those are the ones we need to use. So next up, we'll start up with setting our inventory items first. So in sword shield, let's create a new inventory item. There we go. We'll call this basic shield. There we go. The parent for this is going to be left hand. So if you followed along with my inventory tutorial, you will have this. If not, it's the one from the melee examples anyway, so you should have that. So the description here, we will actually see this description, so make sure to at least assign something. So I'll just call this basic shield, and your very first shield. You can type in whatever you want. Sprite will assign those as well. So I already addressed that before in a previous video. I'm using rapid icon to just create icons from the actual prefabs provided by Polygon Fantasy Kingdom that we're using for this video. So I created those sprites, didn't actually have to adjust anything, they were just good by default, I hope at least. Yeah, so we'll assign that in a bit once we've decided on what we're going to be equipping. Now when it comes to shape, I'm not changing anything. When it comes to price, yeah, this is a bit much. So actually we cannot sell this one to merchants. Let's just be clear about that. We should be changing that. Can buy from merchant. So the price is irrelevant actually. But we can just do 0. These are the basic ones. You can never literally get rid of this one because you always need to have something in the inventory, and I'll explain a bit more in a bit. We're not going to do properties yet, so that's for the next video where we're actually going to be combining stats with our inventory melee items. Sockets, yeah, that's fine for now. And then the equipment, of course, is the most important part. Is this equipable? Crafting is irrelevant for this one. These are the basic ones, so it's not a use item, it's equipment. Crafting is irrelevant because these are the basic ones you start with, so you can't craft them. No prefab here, again, necessary. We can't drop it, and we can't sell it. So yeah. So can equip, yay, yes, we can equip. No conditions are needed. And then what we're going to do is we're going to set a game object and then a global variable, global name variable, and it is called, what did I call it again? Let's have a look. Combat global, there we go. And this is our melee shield. From, and this is where we need to assign which item it is. Now we're gonna go through those items straight away because we need to make some changes to the items as well. Again, there's quite a bit going on here. Keep in mind this is mostly for the visual part. If you have a better solution for that afterwards, you know, go ahead. I don't think this is really a big deal to set it up like this, but weapons, and so yeah, I'm already going to drag it in, and then let's actually address them. So this is the shield. So let me open this up. So this is the shield, this is the model, and this is the item that we'll be using in the melee module. So we need to only assign that to a global variable. We're not doing anything else. We're turning off mesh renderer by default, and again that has to do with our equipment system, which I'll explain in a bit. And then on here we're going to add a trigger, so add trigger, and then here from this list select variables, global name variable change, drop in our proper one, so the new one we created, combat global, there we go. Then melee shield visual. Then we're going to go to our conditions. There we are. So yeah, create them, of course. So game creator, create visual scripting conditions. Then make sure to drag those in. I always forget that. Turn off mesh renderer, by the way, just to keep that in mind. Drag in those conditions. And then here, these are our conditions. So again, let me make sure these are our proper new ones. And there we go. So here we add the condition bool, just to show you, compare boolean. Then the first one we'll do variables, global name variables. Again, drag in our global name variable. And then melee shield visual equals true. So now it's exactly the same. Then invoke method. So here just type in method, invoke method, click here, and then just drag in the shield, mesh renderer, and bool enabled. I find this actually slightly easier to do than the component lookup one, because it's sometimes a bit difficult to use. Anyway, so yeah, that's it. And then in the other branch, so you just add a new branch, and in the other branch it's literally the opposite. So if it's false, it's turned off. I mean, yeah, the opposite basically. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Sweet. Then copy, well, you don't actually have to copy anything over. Then we're going to go back to our prefabs here. Shield, and you can pick a different shield, by the way. It doesn't have to be this one. I think it looks just incredibly basic, which makes it perfect. You just duplicate it 3 times. You know, change the name just so you know which one is which. Yes. And then this is the first duplicate. So we open it. Let's open it up. So in the first duplicate, the mesh renderer is turned on. The mesh collider, by the way, on both is turned off. Just make sure we don't have any issues with the melee module. And then here, let's, oh, sorry about that. Let's make sure we select our new one. We're going to drag in combat global, and then, well, for you that should have been the same. And then inventory shield visual. So inventory, not melee. And then in the conditions, you basically swap out the same thing. So, you know, make sure they're, you know, if it's true. Actually, this, I think this remains exactly the same for you. I don't think you'll have to change anything else. So this will remain the same. And let's head over to our third one, which is inventory character. I know it's quite the setup. Inventory character is going to be much simpler though, because you're basically removing that trigger, just delete it and remove the conditions. So just turn off the mesh collider and that's it. Now this is quite the setup, and yes, you'll need to do the same for the sort. So I'm using sort 4, and again, it's the exact same setup. However, we're adding one thing, which I'll address in a bit. But other than that, it's the same setup. Let's make sure we use our correct global variables. There we go. I'm sorry for not recreating this. It just saves a bit of time as it's just duplicating stuff. There we go. And there we go. So this is all identical to how it works with the shields, by the way. It's literally no difference. And then sort the duplicate for the inventory. There we go. There we go. So yeah, this should all be the same if you duplicated it. It should all just be good. Just again, make sure this one has the mesh render turned on, and the one for inventory character, just like the other one, only has the sword, no mesh collider, and no triggers and actions and conditions. Perfect. So that's it. Now let's head back to that sword. Let's turn on mesh renderer for now, and then right click, create a game object, and then on this object we're going to add striker. So it's literally called striker. If you're familiar with Game Creator 1, this is actually really similar. So striker, there we go. And then yeah, let's just go to the settings already set up. So yeah, this is it. So we move this a bit, 90 here, capsule, point A and point B. Basically this is what the melee module uses for hits. So it doesn't use any default colliders, it has its own system, it needs to cover the sword. I'm not even sure if this is perfect, because ideally this is quite precise. The melee examples actually make it quite a bit bigger, so there's less chance to avoid to accidentally miss your hits, but I think this is fine. And then it has the sword trail. So this is what actually captures hits. for the melee module. Yeah, this one this doesn't. So the mesh collider is off, and it's basically just a model, and this is what actually captures the hits. So yeah, take over these settings. I mean, it's not that complex. And yeah, that's it. Now I'm going to turn off that mesh renderer again on this model, and there we go. Cool. So those are the models, the prefabs. The rest I'll do from scratch. Don't worry about it. It's just mindless repetition here. So yeah, we're back to this part. So the one we're actually assigning here is the shield that is used for melee. So that's this one. So we can assign it here. And then what we're going to do is, because we want this to be visually pleasing, we're going to, once you equip it, attach it to the back of the character. Now I'm attaching both to the back of the character because this animation pack equips and unequips their items on the back of the character. If you use animations where the sword is on the side, for example, you will need to place it on the side. So it just needs to match the animations. Again, it's just a visual process, doesn't change anything on how it all works, but it needs to visually match, of course. So we're going to do attach prop. Should have just typed in prop. Attach prop. There we go. Now we'll have two. We'll have one for the player, and we'll have one for the inventory character, which is why we created this one, of course. And the first one, this one, is what will, this is what it looks like. This is what will attach on the player's back. So that's not the same prefab as we're assigning to this global variable, because this global variable is going to be used for the actual melee module items, just to keep that in mind. So yeah, we have this one. So that's the inventory one, and we're going to, I chose upper chest, because with movements it just matches the best. I think that's normally in a lot of rigs called spine 3. Just made a lot of sense for it to be completely at the top. I think you can do spine 2 as well. I don't think it matters much. Anyway, so I already know the values because I already did it, of course. But again, if you use different models, if you use different if you do use different models, you'll need to mess around with how it's with what the values are. Now, if you want to know what the values should be, let me show you. It's pretty straightforward. So where is our root? There we go. I missed it. So like I said, I'm attaching it to spine 3, which is upper chest, just to be clear. So we'll just drag it right now on spine 3, just to show you. I'll type in the same values. Now it's invisible now for a reason, because for some, the scaling is weird with polygon pack. Not really sure why. So I'm going to type in the same values. So 7.6, 11.5, minus 0.4, minus 80, 90. There we go. So this is what it will look like on the player. Now there's a tiny bit of distance, and of course it looks weird if you're not wearing any clothes. You should be wearing clothes, but yeah, this is what it looks like. Really nice, looks lovely. This won't interfere at all with clothes or stuff like that you're wearing. Yes, you can have some clipping, and there's no magical solution for that. AAA games have clipping as well. You look at the latest Assassin's Creed games and you'll have armor on the back. There will be clipping. I mean, it's unavoidable unless you literally handcraft everything yourself. All you can do is try to avoid it as much as you can. So yeah, anyway, so this is what it looks like. So if you're using different models, well, and you want the placement to be different, just copy over the values that it should look like, and that's it. So those are the values you're attaching. So yeah, now that I've explained how it works, I'm not gonna go through that again. So yeah, we've done it now for the player. Of course, we need to do the same for the inventory character. Needs to, again, visually match. So global name variables. And this one, I think the inventory character is in menu global. Menu global and inv character. There we go. Values are identical, it's no difference. However, the prefab is different, and it's this one. Now the reason for that is because we're doing some, renderer, turning on off tricks to make it all look good. However, that should never impact the inventory character. You don't want there to be a moment where the prefab isn't visible. That's just weird. And that's why I created this one. So that's literally the only reason why we have 3 prefabs. It's just the visual part. But it needs to look good, right? Cool. And on equip, yeah, it's pretty straightforward. So on equip, we're going to copy this one over, paste it in here, and then here we're going to type in none. And yes, as you can see right now, it still says it. That's a weird visual bug with some of the game creator stuff. Not really sure if that's game creator or if it's Unity, but as you can see, it's gone now. It happens at times. It's a bit weird. Cool. Then next up, we're going to do remove prop. Just should type in prop again. Not detach, by the way. So detach is for something if you want to drop it on the floor, for example. So then it will literally detach from the rig and it will still be an object. It's a bit more nuanced. So remove just properly removes it. And a nice thing here, compared to Game Creator 1 really, is that we can basically, because of the way remove and assign works, we can actually have multiple items on the same rig point. So multiple on the upper chest, because we'll put the sword there as well, because that's where it should be. But because we're literally referring to which item we're removing, we don't have to just assign it to a different bone. So big improvement compared to Game Creator 1 here. Really happy with that. And again, variables, global name variables, and then menu global, and then inventory character, and there we go. So yeah, this will now, all this literally does actually the inventory item for now. It'll manage our stats later on. So in the next video, it will actually allow us to manage our stats. But for the moment, all it does is a visual piece. So it just visually shows the item, and it assigns that same item to our to a global variable, and that is the global variable we'll be using to display the weapon for our archetype. So that's it for the shield. Now what we're going to do is the sword. Luckily, we can just duplicate this one and change a couple of things, so it will save us a tiny bit of time. So this was the shield. Now we're going to do the sword. There we go. It will tell you that another item has the same ID, and we just need to regenerate. Obviously, the sword is right hand, not left hand. Yes, it's equipable. And it's not a basic shield, it's a basic sword. And it's your very first sword. We could have actually done the sprites. I completely forgot about that. Let's actually quickly do that. It will make it visually not just more pleasing, but having a sprite actually makes you recognize the items, because without the sprite it's actually quite difficult. So rapid icon, exports, there we go. And this is the shield, so let's do shield, this one, of course, because the other one doesn't have an item. okay. What does it look like? Yeah, it looks good. Yeah, I didn't customize this export at all. I just selected the folder and this is the outcome. I think it's pretty alright. I think it's not too bad. And then let's just do it in the actual resolution. And let's do the same with the sword. Sprite. And then 256. It's not the highest resolution, but I thought it was going to be high enough. Maybe I was wrong. Anyway, we can just type in the SM lowest score web. Let's just do it like that. There we go. So this was the shield. And then for the sword, obviously it's the other one. And there we go. Nice thing, doesn't recognize any of the other images that aren't actually set as sprites. So perfect, saves you a lot of time. Cool. What else do we need to change? So we'll need to change some of the values here. So first of all, we're going to be assigning this. I think, yeah, I didn't do anything else yet. So first of all, this will be a melee weapon. And then here we'll be using the sword. There we go. Here we'll be using the sword as well. And the reason I picked this sword, by the way, is because it looked pretty much the most basic of all of them. Still not that basic, let's be real. But just the most basic of all the models in this pack. So a lot of them were straight away looking a bit too high end. Yeah, that's it. So it will equip it to the same bone, and luckily we can do that now, which is really nice. This one we'll need to make sure this is melee weapon as well, that it clears. And yeah, that's pretty much it. We don't need to do anything else. So make sure it's set to right hand, and again, we can't craft or anything like that. Sweet. So that's it for our inventory items. Actually, we'll address how to make sure that you can't actually completely unequip a shield in general. I'll show you that later on. But yeah, these are the basics for these items. Cool. Then next up, it's going to be the big item, of course. It's the actual sword or melee module item. So weapon here. So we'll need to call this. What do we call this? I'll start off all of them with arch. For arch type. I don't know if that's the best idea, but yeah, we'll do it. Things like title, description, I don't care about. It's completely irrelevant. I'm not sure where we would see this, so I'm not going to do it. We'll create a new straight. Let's just do this straight away so we can actually assign it all. Shield as well. Arch shield. Now, even with the different arch types, no, that's the wrong saying. So yeah, let's do sword shields. So just to be clear, I know it's a bit double, but it needs to be separated. So this is not, let's drag it in. This is not a physical shield. So shields might be a bit of a wrong word here. So shield is actually just the block mechanism. So it allows you to block, counter, things like that. It's not a physical item. We can't even assign a physical item anymore compared to Game Creator 1, which I'm really happy with. By the way, this just works better. So I'm glad it's done this way. But this is basically just a blocking, countering type of mechanism. You don't need one. For example, you know, there's plenty of games, including Zelda, wherein some items you can't block with. But it's not the physical shield, just to be absolutely clear about that. Then what we'll need next as well is combos. Where is it? Melee combos. Arch, sword, shield, combos. There we go. And the combos can be done multiple ways. So you can have it embedded, quite similar to Game Creator 1, and you'll have the combos here, or as a separate asset file. I prefer to do it this way. It makes it easier to duplicate it and things like that. But yeah, this is basically it. So the combos file is basically where all of the combos will be housed. It's not where you create them, but where they'll be housed. So quite important. Hit reaction, parried reaction, we'll need those as well. So let's create those straight away. And we'll fill it in a bit. I just want to hit those boxes so that we have it all. Now that's one big difference, by the way. So Game Creator 1, you had one melee clip, which basically was skill and reaction combined. And you needed to make some changes. Game Creator 2's melee works really different. Reactions really are a separate type of object, which is a good thing because they don't need to be as elaborate, they need to be more basic, but they need a couple of other options as well. So I'm actually really happy with how this is handled. Not something I ever really thought about before, but it's done well. So sword, shield, and then let's call this self-hit reaction. There we go. And let's duplicate that. And then we'll call this self parry reaction. Now the reason I say self, it's just so it allows me to differentiate which reaction types are for you know, the player or the one receiving it. So self hit and self parry. There we go. We need a state as well, of course. So we'll just house that in here actually. And basically what we'll need to duplicate is locomotion walk and locomotion run. Rename those sword, shield, and this one as well. We'll address the animations in a bit, just so we have it. And one more time. There we go, block, let's call it like that. The reason I duplicated these is because we already have all of this set up. And there's a couple of interesting things you can do. So depending on the type of game you're using, you can actually turn off, for example, jumping while you're in melee combat if you want to use the spacebar for something else. Just a thought. That's really nice that we can control that now here. So, you know, or you could limit air jumps if you have that turned on. You could limit jump force because you're using your equipment. There's quite a lot you can modify here, which is really nice if you want to do that. Change the acceleration, all of that. And you don't need to set up a bunch of actions conditions. You can just manage that here, which I think is actually really nice. I'm starting to really like this more and more. Now, technically, we could have had the entry and exit clip here for equipping, unequipping, but we're not going to do that because it's too limited, causes too many complications. So we won't do that here. And we'll go about assigning those in a bit. We're not doing that right now. So again, here we can actually assign it. I might change the name a bit because it's not the nicest name anyway. So yeah, we've got all of the basics set up. Now we're going to do the equip equip actions. So we're going to do attach again. So let me just type in prop this time. So player, and no inventory character here. So the inventory character is not going to, I mean, I don't see the point of that. It's not going to be drawing its weapon. It's just going to be random. And then we're going to assign our global name variable. What was it? Combat global. There we go. And then let's start off with a weapon. First. So right hand. And again, these values, I already showed you how to do this before, how to align the prop. But again, these values are the values that work for this sword and these characters. You know, again, if you're using different models, you'll need different values. But again, I showed you how to do that. So not even saying these are the best values, they work. Then we're going to duplicate this, and then we'll select melee shield. And then for the melee shield, it needs to be left hand. And then, yeah, these values are slightly different. The shield actually could be aligned a bit better. I'm fine with it, but it could actually objectively be aligned a bit better. Yeah, anyway. There we go. And then, of course, as you might have guessed, on equip, we're going to type in prop again, and we'll need to remove those props. Again, no prefab variable, global name variable, combat global, and then melee weapon, duplicate, melee shield. Now, I think you can guess right now why we did it this way. So this is our archetype. So sword and shield is an archetype. We can have a lot of inventory items that are sword and shield. They can have different shield models. They can have different sword models. What we're visually seeing is what is assigned to these global variables. So this allows you to basically add a ton of inventory items, and you've seen you know, the inventory items, they're really basic. You can now just duplicate them, swap out the models. We'll go about changing the stats later. But yeah, you only need to have one archetype of the melee module. You don't need different ones, just the one for sword and shield, and you can have a ton of different models visually. And of course stats as well, which is what we'll do later. So yeah, really cool. Quite an elaborate setup to get there, but once you've set it up, it actually makes it really easy to just add a ton of items to your system. So quite happy with that. Yes, it will take a tiny bit of time to create 3 duplicates every time of an item, but you know, it is what it is. On dodge, we'll set this up as well. Time scale, there we go. We'll set this up. So basically, this is a mechanic in a ton of games actually, and what it does is it slows time on a perfect dodge. You know, there's plenty of games that do this. Breath of the Wild is one of them, or you know, Zelda. It's one of those games, but there's a ton of other games that do it as well. Time scale back to 1. We'll mess around with this a bit more once we actually have some AI set up for this as well. But yeah, why not just add it straight away? So it's a really, you know, quite common mechanic, but it's really cool, and it gives perfectly dodging a, you know, you actually have a reason to try that. Once we will dive into that a bit more, we're actually going to look at how time scales and layers and all of that work too. Because this, you know, in Game Creator 2, you can actually have, you can actually have multiple, you can actually do the proper slow-mo, so you can actually have the enemies around you move slower than you. Game Creator 1 was technically possible, it was quite difficult to do. Game Creator 2 is actually much simpler to do, but yeah, that's for a different video. Some really cool stuff can be done with this now. You can actually have proper bullet time where you move faster, things like that. Really cool stuff. Anyway, so yeah, we've got all of this set up now, so that's pretty much all there is to it. And what we'll need to do next is, let's start off with assigning all of those animations. So we'll need to replace these and these and these. Now there is a chance that whatever animation pack you're using doesn't actually have a full locomotion set for a blocked state. Big chance that if you use a different pack they won't have it. What you want to do then is, instead of this entire locomotion like I'm doing here, you'll want to right click Game Creator, where is character, and then you do a animation state, so not a basic locomotion, an animation state. There we go. Here you want a mask. I'll show you how to make a mask as well. Where is it? Avatar mask. There we go. So you'll do the avatar mask. We'll do this for the horse combat video anyway. But yeah, basically what you want to do is this. So this needs to be turned off, so only this will be animated. Then you'll drag this in, and then here you'll have that single idle block state animation, which you'll drag in. And then for the lower body, it will just be the default locomotion. Now this isn't perfect, or sometimes it can be. If you're really lucky with how it's animated, it can actually look just perfect. There's a big chance it won't be, like, let's be real. But yeah, if you don't have a full animation pack for, you know, the block state, this is your only way to go about it, pretty much. And then you'll just drag in the animation clip here. Now I do have a full block state in this animation pack, so I'll just be dragging those in. So yeah, again, I'm using the Paladin set. Where is it? Paladin anim set, animations, humanoid, and I'm going to be dragging in all of the movements to these states. So pause the video, drag everything in, and I'll see you in a bit. So here we are with the full animation set. So, you know, it's the walk strafe, it's the run strafe, and it's the defense walk. Now for the idle, if you are using the same pack, there's a couple you can use. I use this one because it seems a bit more aggressive. Just made me realize that my shield placement is definitely wrong if this is how it's supposed to be. Oh well, just adjust that. Anyway, so yeah, there's a couple you can use. I use this one because it's a bit more combat ready, whereas the other ones are, I have them drawn out, but I'm not really ready to fight. I don't know, doesn't match that well. So yeah, those are what I use for the animation states. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Again, make sure you turn off root motion on those, because otherwise you'll just get weird results. So next up, we'll need to set up our shield as well. So I'm fully aware that not everything, of course, is ready yet for the sword, but we'll need to set up our shield too. So for our shield, actually quite interesting, quite different compared to last time. So you have an angle, and the angle basically how what your defense force is. So 180 is literally, this is your defense range. So the physical shield does nothing. It's not like with the first one, it doesn't have to have an item, nothing like that. So 180 is just means from this part you can defend. Now there's plenty of games where the defense angle is actually 360. It's not 180. It just automatically defends on every state. So that's up to you. I'll leave that up to you what you want to do with it. Mess around, see what works. Then we have parry time. I mean, that speaks for itself. That's the window in which you can actually parry instead of block. Defense value. Not going to go too deep into this because, you know, as I mentioned before, we'll set up the stats later. Cooldown, recovery as well. Again, I'm not going too deep into this. The state, well, we just set that up. So let's drag that in. There we go. Then we have the speed. Really cool that you can do this. You can actually make it go a bit faster if you want. Transition in out. I really like these default times, so I'm not going to mess around too much with them. They seem to work with pretty much any animation I've ever tried. They're just good values. But yeah, you can change it. Then we have a block. Again, when it comes to effects and things, I'll leave that up to you. I'm not going to go too deep into that. That's just visual effects. And then we have the reaction animations as well. So we need to create some reaction animations. So let's create those. So I'll just duplicate and rename. It's just easier. This is just the default parry reaction. So that is what the enemy will have basically. Or what the no, that's not right. That's what the shield will do for parry. The block. Block reaction, and the last one is the break reaction. There we go. So yeah, block, parry, break. Let's just drag them in so we have them, and we'll change them after. So parry, no, that's the wrong one. Parry, and then break as well. So break is basically if this defense value hits 0, what animation will you be playing? There's some really nice, if you check the examples again, we'll go into more deeper animation attacks later. But you can have different follow-ups based on the parry. So basically kind of like counter attacks. Some really cool stuff. There's so much that can be done with it. But for now, we just need all of the reactions. Sweet. So yeah, we've got those for all. I think right now it's time to actually set up the animations themselves. So for the self-hit, and I'm going to explain how this works, because again, this is really different from Melee 1, and it can be quite different depending on what animation packs you have as well. So first of all, we have the hit reactions. So for hit reactions, Melee 1 was really basic, and then suddenly you had Melee Upgrade, which I use in so many videos, and in Melee Upgrade you had basically directional attacks. Which is cool, but if you didn't have them, you still needed to assign them. So I'm really glad with how Melee 2 handles this. So if you only have one hit reaction, so if you get hit, the type of melee clip, direction, you just choose from any, so the default, and you assign the one clip. Gravity is here for a reason. So gravity has to do with the fact that Melee 2 can be used for in-air combat, like juggling, like you have in God of War, the newer ones. Devil May Cry, of course, famous example of that. So that's why gravity comes into play. We're not going to be using that right now, but yeah, it's really cool that it's all there. Anyway, so we have the condition here. Now, personally, in this pack, I actually do have pretty much every direction. As you can see, there's even top. So that's if you come from the top. Really cool that that's in there too. Not going to use that as I don't have it. So we have from front, and then basically we'll need to add we'll need to add all of them. So from back. If you have multiple from front, you can even add more, so you have a bit more variation in the hit attacks. Really cool stuff. You know, it adds a lot of variety. It makes it look all more dynamic. So if you have them, you know, definitely assign multiple. And then from right, so I'm just going to do the default reactionals. Pretty cool. So I know what they're called, so I'm just gonna type them in. So hit, need to learn how to type. Hit body back, and it needs to be the these ones. So not the in place, the normal ones, because the in place are just weird. For the wait, this is the okay, I'm mixing it. Okay, so this needs to be back. Sorry about that. So that's the back, and this is the front. Luckily, we can just change that. For the front, I'm actually using a different one. So I'm not using the body one. I'm using the head. Reason for that is that the default front attack in this pack, it looks weird. It's just, it doesn't make a lot of sense. The head one actually is just way nicer. The normal one, I don't know, I just don't like it. To me, it seems like you're still being hit from in the back. Like, I don't know, it's just a weird one. Then from left, I'm just going to do the body ones. But yeah, technically you could add both if you want to mix it up a bit. You know, so you have the head animations if you're using the same pack as well. There's plenty of packs that have multiple. Even if it's only one direction, they'll have multiple. So really cool that this is supported. Really nice. Again, on these animation clips, make sure root motion is turned off on the clips for RZ, and loop is turned off. I don't think it will actually loop if you don't have it turned off, but just do it anyway just to be sure. And then here you turn on root motion. It's quite important that you do it that way, by the way. So yeah, that's for the self-hit reactions. Pretty plain and simple. And then we'll need to set up the rest as well. So next up, we'll do the self parry. So for the self parry, I don't actually have the same amount of options, so I'm just going to make it a bit more basic. So we have from back and from front. In terms of parry, normally it should just be the one anyway. It should always be from front, but I just added it just in case. So this pack has a oh, not a mask, sorry about that. It has a heavy clip, so they actually walk back a bit. So hit heavy. Oh, we actually do have all the directions. I never realized that. So that's my bad. So front, back, and then apparently we do have left and right. I did not realize that the first time I set this up, so I'm glad I was wrong. And then the right. There we go. So just to demonstrate what they look like, and because here I need to turn that off, I know that now because I didn't have those. So these actually, you know, they're quite heavy. I don't think we'll actually get those as parry reactions from this angle. I don't think that will ever really, I think it's a small chance that would actually ever happen, but yeah. As you can see, there's a lot more movement, which is nice because that allows for the follow-up attack, which often is quite a bit more, you know, has a bit more motion because it's a bit more demonstratic. So yeah, really cool stuff. Let's turn off that loop. And there we go. Cool. So yeah, those are the self parry, the self hit, all nice. Nice clips. And then for we're going to go to our block reaction. So there I only have from any. I don't have multiple ones in this pack as far as I've seen. And even this one, it's not the nicest because it's I should actually be should actually modify it a bit. Basically this is quite I don't know, I think it's quite heavy. So yeah, we'll just use some quite a bit of blending for this this one actually. So let's have a look. So we have the block reaction, and then we have the transition in out. Let's make that a bit more aggressive. 0.25 on both ends. That's better. Then for the break, well, I already showed you that for the break, which again is only from any. And then here we're going to select, just type in break. I think that should be fine. There we go. And then for the parry, we only need the one as well. So it's from any. There we go. And for this, I'm actually using an attack. And I'll also not the absolute biggest fan of this. I might need to customize this one a bit as well, as it's quite a bit elaborate. As you can see, it's you know, it's, well, it's supposed to be an attack. Might actually not be that bad. No, it's actually pretty good. Yeah. Okay, it's actually not bad. Cool. So yeah, it looks like an attack, but it's basically deflecting their sword. And then this is what we'll have to follow up, of course, with an attack normally. Perfect. So we've got all of our reactions set up. So we're all good with the reactions as well. So awesome. So we've got our sword shield set up. And then now it's time for our combos. So the combo file itself, we don't actually have to do anything right now. The most important thing is actually setting up our combos, because the combo file, all it really does is just it organizes and the input, of course, but you don't create your combos there. So let's go and create our first skill, melee skill. And these skills, I'll be fair, this has been the biggest improvement of this module. I'll actually call it skill, sword shield, light A. There we go. This has been the biggest improvement of this module. The possibilities are, I'll be fair, they're endless. There's so much we can do here. Yeah, there's just so much we can do here. I absolutely love this one. So what I'll do right now anyway, let me actually assign an animation first. So I'm using the first combo for this. If you have a pack that doesn't have combos broken up, it just has random attacks, just combine them. You know, with the transition times, most of the time it will look good anyway. But a lot of packs will have combos just broken up into multiple files. So we'll drag it in again. Quite important here with combos as well. Root motion needs to be turned off. But for this one, it's a bigger reason even, because you don't actually have to use root motion. There's different ways you can address this. So let's go over how these skills work. Because like I said, there's so much we can do. There's so many possibilities here. It's actually quite amazing, all of the things that can be done with this. We can do magical attacks with this. We can do so much with this. Yeah, it's really awesome. So let's dive in, and I want to explain a bit how all of this works, because it can be quite overwhelming. It was for me as well. First time looking at this, I was like, okay, there's a lot here. Not everything has a hover over, so you're kind of like, so what does it do then? So yeah, I'll try to explain it to the best of my ability. So first things first, we've got title, description. I'm not going to use any of that. I don't really see the point. for now. Maybe for some skill menu we'll create, there will be some value for this. At the moment I'm not seeing it, so I'm not going to use it. We've got charge, so this is for charged attacks. We'll be creating one of those later on, but if you're curious, melee, the examples have an example. Really straightforward. Strike, that's about the direction for this, so that is quite important. So basically, is it, you know, any of these? Quite important. Make sure it just matches the animation. It's really straightforward. Make it match the animation, that's it. Trail, that's the weapon trail. So I'm just leaving it active. I'm not going to change anything at the moment, but you can basically have it changed per attack, which is really cool, because obviously some attacks you want different trails, make it look more impressive. Yeah, it's awesome, it's there. And then we have effects. There's a ton of effects. There's so much you can do. I would recommend definitely adding sounds and things like that, obviously. But yeah, I'm not doing any of that right now. Like sound effects, visual effects, like the small things for melee, you can just add yourself. And if you're curious how it works, I mean, they're just effects, but if you're curious how it works, check melee examples. So let's get into the real stuff. So charge obviously is part of the real stuff. That is quite important, but let's get into everything else. So we've got the actual animation clip. And you know, when we go in skill mode, if you want to see it on your character, you can drag in your character. I don't really find that important, unless it's some, you know, really unusual type of character like a giant or something, and you want to make sure it looks good, you know, go ahead. For the rest, I don't really think it's really that important. You know, I don't know, doesn't matter. Transition in out, I've mentioned this before. I think these are good values. You can change it, but I want. Now gravity, really important. So this is for air juggling, for example. You know, you don't want gravity, so you turn it off. You know, when you're doing the attacks. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And you know, for air juggles, generally you'd assume that the last one in the default combo would be one that strikes back down. So yeah, this is quite important, gravity. If you're going to do a juggle system, not the most common system, but still used in quite a lot of games. So yeah, really cool. Now motion is quite important, but before I dive into that, I want to explain what the current things actually do. So just like in Game Creator 1, this is the active field. So this is where the blade, the striker component, which we added to one of our items, needs to be active. So I think the start time is pretty good. It just yeah, this is where it's pretty much over though, isn't it? Yeah, cool. Then this one, you need to remove it and re-add it. Not really sure why. I had to do that, but yeah, you just had to do that. So this is the cancel period, so basically through which we can cancel the skill. Now it's really important to not have this cancel period be the entire time, because basically then you can't do combos. I've tried it, trust me, you can't. So you can have the cancel period be the beginning, but it shouldn't go further than this. For skill canceling basically would be like if we're going to bring up our shield and you want to cancel any current attacks if you see you need to block. It's quite important. I've been playing quite a bit of Assassin's Creed recently, Odyssey, and skill canceling when blocking, it really is a thing. So I'm glad it's like built in now. Really cool stuff. Then here you can add your own things. So here we can add instructions, what needs to happen at any point. So this is for your visual effects. This is for your sound effects. Really just really cool stuff. You can add multiple, you know, we can add another one and instructions will execute at these points. This is just really cool. We'll be using that a lot for our magical effects later on, special attacks. It's just really important that it's there, and it's there. Then we've got the speed, anticipation, strike, recovery. I'm not going to mess around too much with these. However, these are poise armor, and poise damage. So I think light attacks should do none. So we're going to do constant and then 0. I don't think light attacks should be doing poise damage. That's my opinion. Cool. Then power. Will, these are things we'll address in a bit. Now the important part here is our motion. So like I mentioned before, root motion needs to be turned off on the animations because you might not actually use it. So this is root motion. This is the typical how Game Creator 1 worked as well. Uses root motion, really standard mechanic. And yeah, that's that creates the motion. Now one of the cool things with Game Creator 2 is motion warp. Now if you're not familiar with motion warp is basically what the Batman Arkham games use, what Spider-Man, the new ones use. And motion warp basically allows you to, well, you guess it, warp to your opponent, to your object. So yeah, it's quite an important thing. And when I say quite an important thing, I mean it's actually really important. I actually think it should be a bit shorter even. No. Yeah, maybe I went a bit too far. Anyway, motion warp allows you to warp. So for example, your enemy is here, right? And then if you, with root motion, we'll just do this movement and the enemy is here, so we're not hitting him. Theoretically, with motion warp, if the enemy is here, we can select which part of the animation will warp, and we'll literally move until we reach that character at that point, and we'll hit them. Now, if you don't set some rules around this, it's incredibly overpowered. For example, the Arkham games, even though it flows, I mean, it's almost more like a dance, right? You're flowing through combat. Looks really cool. It's also a bit boring, to be fair, because you're not really hitting that many buttons. You're basically just hitting one, and well, from time to time you parry, but yeah, it also takes away some of the skill. Now, for some things like finishers, motion warp is kind of required for it to look alright. You'll see a lot of games use a type of motion warp for finishers, or they use camera cuts, which is a lot more difficult to set up. So motion warp is a perfect example. The latest Jedi Fallen Order or Jedi Survivor use it as well. Quite obviously, I don't think it does it in the best way, because even though I love those games, it's quite obvious your character is just moving to a point. It sometimes looks a bit weird. So motion warp is a clean solution, but it needs to be handled well. I personally think you need to set some rules around it too, because if you don't set some rules around it, it can make the game way too easy, not even look that good, and yeah, it can be boring as well. If you just teleport to every character with every default attack, it's not really that interesting, is it? So let's set those ground rules. So first things first, this last point needs to match exactly with the starting point, otherwise you can have some weird results. And then here the starting point needs to be when the actual movement happens, so not when we're standing still. So this first one is actually a bit late, isn't it? Yeah, I'm actually thinking should I just make it active here? There we go. I think that's better. Let's do it like that. There we go. That's a good. So let's do here. So it will warp here and then stop warping at the actual attack. Now this is only a short piece. It's actually a really short piece, but you'll see the effect of that if we don't set a rule. And we'll all set this up, then I'll remove the rule once we actually have a target, and you'll see what I mean. It's incredibly powerful, it's really cool, but you'll see how ridiculous it can get if if you don't set some rules around this. So the rule will be, like I said, well, if the character is here with warp, even this small little piece of warp, will warp towards the character at this point. And the distance should matter, but if you don't set a rule for that, this distance literally won't matter. Now the melee example set the rule for that in the actual combo part. I don't want to do that. I want you to be able to hit the attack button at any time, even if there's no enemy, right? You should just be able to break stuff, just play with your swords, you know, whatever. It's a bit weird to set a rule if there's no enemy, so we're not going to do that. We're going to make sure that we can still you know, attack, but we set the rule for the warping actually here. So when we click on this, you'll see linear, and then it will talk about you know, the type of easing. I'm doing linear. There's so many, and I'm sure some will be better. I'm not really sure. I'm not really interested in trying all of these out. Linear works. It's fine. It's not the prettiest one. It's also not the worst one. It just works. So I'm keeping it at linear. Then the self is going to be our target. So character. No, let's just type in targets. Let's just skip it all. So target close. That's the one we're going to be using. And then the radius, and then we're going to do horizontal position. Now I've tried these all. This just gives you gave me at least for this part the best results. Not really sure why. I'm not going to pretend I really know why. It just gave me the best results. Then the target is going to be none, because for now we don't actually have a target set up. Now we're going to add a condition to this, and the condition is going to be a distance condition. So compare distance. The first one is just going to be player. So that's point A, that's us. And then the second point is going to be target, which is already here. And then less or equal, don't do equal, less or equal. And I'm going to do 2 meters. I think that's fair. I think it will still help a bit. So you'll miss a tiny bit less than with, for example, with rude motion, but really not that much. Again, it depends on the animation you have, of course, how much motion there is in it anyway. But I think that's a good point. Now the reason we're doing this, why are we even doing it, is because yes, there's a tiny bit of auto targeting in there. I'll be fair. However, there's also the simple fact that remember in Melee 1, I had to add a focus whenever we attacked, because otherwise we would just miss too much. So that's kind of the auto, you know, aim assist basically for Melee I'm talking about, because we're doing the target close. Then the second thing is the simple fact that you'll have less of a likeliness of going through the enemy, if that makes sense. So you often had the option that you're basically just going through them with the attacks. It was just a bit weird, and this kind of alleviates that too. So yeah, it just works really really well. It's a really cool system. Obviously for some attacks it's just really cool. There's these this pack has like a shield dash attack, which is just absolutely perfect for motion warp, because without it, looks cool, but you're going to miss all the time, so it makes no sense. So motion warp is just absolutely perfect for it. Initially I was a bit suspicious about using it for literally everything, and now I don't think I'll ever use rude motion for any actual literal attack again. I don't think I will. So yeah, really cool. For now on these I'm just going to do a really simple burst shake. Yeah, and that's it. This is way too long, by the way, so 0.1, and then not even the position, just keep it simple. This is the only thing I'm a bit annoyed about, is this should not have been a field like this. This should have been a field like this. So for now I can't really use it, because this requires a local space. Makes very little sense to me. So yeah, anyway, other than that, for now I'm not going to really change anything. We'll address this with the more advanced moves. Cool, that's close skill mode. So we've got our first skill. Don't worry, the rest will go really fast. because now we're just going to duplicate it, change this to double A, sorry, duplicate it again, and we'll change it to AAA. Yay. Then we'll select this one. We'll drag in combo 2. This one we'll drag in combo 3. There we go. Then yes, we'll just need to enter scale mode real quick, because we'll need to adjust these values, of course. There we go. Perfect. So this seems like a good starting point. That's fine. Maybe this is one frame too long, but that's all right. There we go. And then the easing for this one, we'll skip the first frame, but literally everything else can use the warping. Yeah, there we go. That's fine. Cool. Then for the third one, I think we're going with a really similar route here, so it will literally start there. And there we go. Awesome. So yeah, for now, that's it. We're not going to go any deeper into this. Just realized that this one needs to be until the actual point. Yeah, there we go. That's better. Sweet. So yeah, those are for now, those are our 3 clips. Then we're going to go to combos here, and we're going to insert those. Now the first one, let's just drag it in. No, I'm not going to add a light attack tap. There's no charge in this one. I'm not going to add any conditions here about distance like in the melee examples. We already created a distance condition on the actual clip just for the warping part, and I think other than that you should always be able to just press the attack buttons. And then here we do the sub skills, and this is really similar to how it worked in melee 1. I mean, visually it looks different, but yeah, it's the same idea. So these just gets executed in order. You can actually change that to any time. I think that's for some randomization, which is cool, but for fighting I think that's more confusing than it is useful. You can add delays, all of that. We're not doing any of that. So yeah, that's it for our melee combos. And I think we actually have most of our stuff set up now. It's pretty close to complete. So let's start creating some of our triggers, actions, conditions, so we can actually well, use this. So first things first, and let's do it all on the player like we always do with all of our triggers. Let's create a new trigger, and we'll call this draw. There we go. I'm going to do input, and here you can select whatever button you want. Of course, that is completely up to you. Keyboard, general buttons, whatever you do. I'm just going to keep it at simple with E right now. But yeah, do whatever you want. Then run conditions, and we're going to run conditions. There we go. Now here we'll need some you know, branches, and the reason for the branches is actually going to be quite simple. Obviously different arch type means different drawing animations, means different branches. Now luckily you don't need to do it for every weapon. You do need to do it for every arch type. So sword and shield, spears, heavy weapons, whatever you're going to be adding for every arch type, you'll need a new branch. But you can just duplicate and change the timings a bit, and that's pretty much it. So anyway, if Equipped. There we go. Melee, quite important. Melee. And then arch, sword, shield. If that is not equipped, then we're going to add the another condition. No, we actually don't need to do that. We always have something equipped. And yeah, here we need to select the arch type. So I think it's string equals global variable, global name, combat global, arch type. I hope I called it sword shield, otherwise it will be wrong, but I think that was the one. If that equals that, then we're going to do our equip actions. So let's create them. So first of all, gesture, play gesture. Wait till completed. I'm going to turn that off. Yes, root motion. I think the transitioning times are fine. And mine is called equip 2. And I'll show you that as well. So equip 2. Now, as you can see, of course, in the animation clip, he already has them in his hand. But first he's grabbing the shield and then he's grabbing the sword. So there's actually 2 stages to this. It looks really cool, and yes, we can do this as well. And that's why we created all of those infinite bulls. So let me turn these off, by the way. Can't believe it actually works without turning those off. That's interesting. Cool. So yeah, use root motion, and then for the instructions, we're going to straight away equip our melee weapon. Now, arch, sword, shield. Now, if you remember, the ones we use for melee, the mesh renderers are actually turned off by default. They're actually not turned on. So by default, it will just be invisible. Which is good. Then we're going to do a wait, because there's no mesh colliders anyway, so there's no conflict. Going to do a wait. I did the timings for this clip, of course. So 0.5 seconds wait, and then we're going to be messing with bools. So set bool, variable, global name variable, combat global. And then the first bool we're going to be setting is melee shield visual, and it's going to be turned on. So that's the one for our melee object. Then we'll duplicate this, and then the inventory one, so just the visual one, inventory shield, is going to be turned off. So 0.5 seconds is literally the moment where his hands closes his grip behind his back, and he draws out the shield. So that's the moment the models swap visibility. That's all they do. Then we're going to duplicate this again. And really lucky with the timings. It's really well created clip because the timings are just perfect. Then let's duplicate these and these, and then we need to do the same with the sword. Same thing here, so it's a melee one we need to activate. So sword visual, and then inventory visual. There we go, and we swap those as well. And then we do need to wait, add another wait of 1 second, because in total it takes 2 seconds for this clip to complete, and we want that to be completed. Sweet. And then, as you might have guessed, then we're simply going to duplicate this branch, and we're going to toggle these. So here we need to toggle the opposite. So if it has it equipped, what is then going to happen? And then here we're going to do, it's annoying that these don't have the toggles. I love that mechanism. It's a shame that not everything has that. Anyway, unequip. Unequip melee weapon, and it's the same one, sword weapon, arch, sword, shield. There we go. That's at the end, so we can get rid of this, sorry. The 1 second first, it is literally just a reversed clip, by the way. I mean, it looks like it because the timings are just identical, which is really cool. Obviously the sword goes back first then because it's a reverse clip. And yeah, you might have guessed it, now we just need to turn it around. We need to do the opposite. So what if you are using different animations? What do you need to do then? You just need to change the timings to match your animations. That's it. So the rest of the setup is identical. You just need to change your timings. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Cool. That's it for drawing. So I mean, that's it. It actually took me quite a while to figure out a way to do that, but that is luckily all you have to do. Then the next trigger, this is our big one, of course. This is our big trigger. Is the general combat one. Now I'm going to drop as much as possible on the same trigger. It keeps it organized for me. Might not tactically be the smartest thing to do, but it keeps it organized. So first of all, we're going to run some actions. We'll set those up. But basically these are the unstart actions for combat. Meaning this will draw, automatically draw or equip the inventory items and add them for the basics, shield and sword. Again, we'll address that in a bit, how that all works. But it means that just like in most of these games, you always need a type of weapon for the combat. Then next up, we have the first trigger. So let's just collapse this for now because we're not going to be using it. That is input. Now what you're using for combat buttons, that's up to you. I'm going to be using the mouse. So we're going to do not keyboard, mouse press, left, and then input execute. Bit of a weird name, but yeah, that's it. Input execute A, and that's it. Then the next trigger is going to be the same. So input, then mouse, and then mouse press right, and then we're going to start blocking. There we go. Then another trigger. Input button, mouse, and then mouse release of the right is going to be stop blocking. There we go. One of the things I actually want to add to here, and that's up to you, that's actually optional, not every game has it. It definitely is more difficult if you don't have it. But yeah, I like to have it, so we'll do skill. Try cancel skill on the player. So that's the whole skill canceling. Doesn't mean it won't happen, it will only happen in that part we set up. But yeah, if you're not fast enough and you're executing a skill, if you block, you can actually cancel it and do the blocking. I think it's so cool that it's in there. It's really important that it's in there as well. But again, not every game uses this, so if you don't want to have that, go ahead, but I think it's great. Then the next trigger, I know a lot of triggers here, is going to be mouse press again. So input mouse press, and here I'm going to use the middle, and I'm using the middle for our targeting system, so it will run our targeting. So we'll set up those conditions in a bit. But yeah, these are running conditions. Let's actually create those actions and conditions so I don't forget about it. And then conditions. We'll just assign them straight away, because yeah, I know I'll forget about it otherwise. And there we go. Perfect. So collapse, 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 and this will do our targeting, which is quite a simple setup, don't worry. Then next up, for our targeting, is actually one of the ones I wish Game Creator 1 had, is input flick. Really weird when you think about the name, but when you go to mouse, suddenly we have mouse wheel scroll up and down. So I'm going to do up here, and then we're going to cycle next target. So that's how I want to set up my targeting. So basically, if we lock onto a character, and there's multiple characters, if we scroll the mouse wheel, it will switch between those targeted. It just makes a lot of sense to do it like that. I'm pretty sure I've played several games that do it like that, and I think it's just a great system. Now we have next and previous, which is just great. And then here we'll need to do mouse and down. So yeah, really cool. It will make targeting so easy. It works well in combat. I'm just really happy with it. Sweet. So let's start setting up our actions and conditions. So actions, let's just properly name them on start as well, so we actually know what we're talking about. So first off, you can't just equip an item. You need to add the item to the player first, because otherwise, you know, he won't have it. So basic shield, and then basic sword. So we have our items. Those are the ones we set up, right? Yeah, okay. Perfect. Then we're going to do a small weight, really small, and we have a black frame anyway that takes 0.5 seconds, so we're all good here. But we need that small weight, and then we're going to do equip item, and then yeah, you know, it's the same one, yay, and then sword. So yeah, we're basically equipping our basics straight away from the start. Don't worry, we'll address how when we have multiple, how we're going to do that. Don't worry about it. And then conditions are the conditions for our targeting. But before I do that, let's first create our new camera shot. So there's so much you can do here when it comes to camera shots and the look and feel. I mean, that's really up to you. I'm just going to show you the new camera shot type we have. What am I doing? There we go. We'll call this combat. So we have a new type of camera shot because of the melee module. That's what we'll be using. When it comes to the settings, I'm just going to fill in what, you know, my settings basically. You don't have to do that, of course. So it's the lock on, which is one of the new ones. You don't have to do my settings, but you know, I'll show you how it works. Let's just do it. So I'm not sure if we can just type it in like that. Yeah, character targets. There we go. So this will be locking on the character target from the player perspective. So whatever character is set as a target for the player. It will make sense in a bit once we create some characters that have it. It's actually really simple. It sounds complex, it's really not. Target zoom is just set to 1. Minimum distance 2.5. Input for zooming none, because I don't like that mechanic. And it would conflict with our target switching anyway. But yeah, I never add zoom. I've never seen that in a combat game anyway. And then the anchor offset. This is just to kind of match how the default one looks. And yeah, again, these values, mess around with it. Once I go into play mode, you'll see what it looks like. Mess around with it, make it how you want. You know, it's your shot, right? Shot preview does nothing here, by the way. But yeah, mess around with it, see what settings you like. I think this one just makes sense for me. But yeah, that's it. Cool, then let's actually set up those conditions to use this shot, use the targeting in general. So conditions. And then luckily for the conditions, Game Creator 2 has so many additional conditions that we don't need to do local bulls for everything. So I always look around as much as I can to know if I can avoid using a local bool, and luckily there was. So first of all, if the default shot is active and so the main shot is active, and we have our melee sword, so not the inventory, so equipped, but we have our melee sword equipped. Quite important difference here. Has to be the melee one, not the inventory one, because we have that always equipped. So the melee one means we drew our weapon. Drew, right? Not drawn? Yeah, drew. Okay. So we drew our weapon, then we can target. You don't need to do this. So if you want targeting to always be on, even if you don't have a melee weapon, always be optional, even if you don't have your weapon drawn, just remove this condition. I'm adding it as a condition because I think it's weird to just lock on to objects without sword active, but that's me. If you actually want that, just don't add this condition. That's it. Cool. Then what we're going to do is we're going to cycle to the closest target. You can also do target's direction, by the way. So this is basically the target the camera is looking at the closest. Now the reason I do the character the camera is actually looking at. The reason I do closest is I was playing some Assassin's Creed and actually realized it doesn't do camera direction. It actually does closest instead of direction. I never really realized that until once you start looking how mechanics work, you realize that. If you don't like that, you can do direction instead. But closest in a combat game with multiple characters around you, it just instinctively makes the most amount of sense to lock on that. And I think that's why they do it. Yeah, it just makes the most amount of sense. Anyway, again, you don't have to do that. Just do direction instead if you prefer that. Then we're going to do change rotation. No, okay. Maybe not change rotation. Maybe just do rotation. There we go. Set character rotation. I thought it was, yeah, and now it becomes change. Really annoying. So here facing, this is the default, by the way. Just so you know, this is what the default is set to. Here we're going to do look at target. And then target is character target. We already looked that up before. Character target. And then from player, again, this is from the player list, so it will make sense in a bit, but basically whatever is set as a target for the player, that's what we're looking at. Makes sense. This has kind of replaced the old focus system in Game Creator 1. I'll be fair, the focus system in Game Creator 1 was easier to set up, but it was a lot more limited, so the whole cycling through didn't exist. So yeah, I don't mind a couple of extra steps if I can avoid all of those limitations. Then we're going to change our shot, which is our new one. I'm not actually adding any easing because my shot is really similar to the default camera. Similar, not the same, but similar. So I'm actually removing your easing because it can have some weird effects actually. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Well, as usual, what we're going to do now is we're going to duplicate this entire branch, change the shot so if combat is active, and still we have the weapon. And the reason I added the weapon actually is partially because of this, yeah, because otherwise if we cycle without the weapon, it's anyway. We can turn this off now. We can even turn this off for now. We just change back to the default shot. And we're going to look up set rotation again. And the reason I'm doing it like this is because, like I said, this is the default. So it just makes the most amount of sense to do it like that. Perfect. And yeah, that's it for all of our actions. Now let's add some targets we can focus on, so we can actually try all of this out. So let's duplicate this. character. There we go. I'm going to use one of the polygon Fantasy Kingdom ones. Prefab character. Soldier male. There we go. Yay. Perfect. So we've got our character. Then this one I have a trigger on start. And then add target candidate, and then self. So this is how something becomes a target. Meaning, yes, you can add this to anything. So for if you have a tutorial section where you can target bottles, or for shooting later, or for mannequin for melee for practice, this is how you can add any object as a target. And then I'm going to equip the same. He won't. For now, he's going to have an invisible weapon, of course. But I'm going to add the exact same weapon to the character just so he has some hit reactions. There we go. And it will be invisible, but that's fine. He just needs to have the hit reactions. And then let's duplicate him twice. There we go. One here. And one here. Sweet. And yeah, let's enter play mode and give this a try. Cool. I messed up with the sword. I just realized that now. So yeah, the sword is wrong. So wrong rotation. That's okay. So anyway, I have to fix that. I see I forgot to add. Yeah, I forgot to add the state. Okay, let's fix those couple of things first, because that's actually really annoying. So what did I do wrong here? So first of all, it looks like I didn't assign a state. Oh yeah, it's completely missing. Not really sure what happened there. Don't worry, we'll set up the run in a bit, by the way. There we go. So that's the walk, and then the rotation of the inventory. So let's quickly fix that actually in runtime. There we go. So these were my values, and they're obviously not correct. I think these are actually were just the shield values. I think that's my mistake. I just assigned the shield values. Yeah, I think that's fine-ish. Actually, it needs to align with the shield, otherwise it just looks weird. There we go. That's fine. Let me quickly snip this and assign them properly. Perfect. Cool. And yeah, as you can see, it really looks like we're assigning it. Yes, we're... Oh, okay, so I did it right. I did it right on one of them. I just didn't do it right on both of them. My bad. Fair enough. So the targeting. So we're targeting him right now. If I scroll the wheel, as you can see, you know, where whatever direction I scroll, we're switching between them, which is cool. We'll add the visuals to make it clear who we're targeting in a bit. But right now, if I do up, I go there. If I do down, I go there. Yeah, and it allows us to switch between the targets. Absolutely love it. It's really simple, straightforward. If I click again, we're not actually on targeting, which is interesting, because we should be on targeting, right? Yeah, we should be on targeting, and we're not. So I made a small mistake in that condition as well. So another thing to fix. Let's have a quick look. I'm not really entirely sure why. Middle. Maybe have wait to finish turned off. So if that shot is active, so that's that shot. Change to combat, change to camera, change the order. Yeah, I mean technically this should have worked. I can't really explain why it doesn't work, so we'll have to try that again. Anyway, let's first fix our shield. No, not shield, sword. What went wrong here? What went wrong? There we go. So for the sword, I completely forgot to change these values. So this is minus 30.07. I thought I did all of this, apologies. And this is 19.5, the same. And then 0, 180, 100. And then here, well, this is all the same. So we can just copy that over, 180, 100. There we go. Perfect. So let's try this again. Still not entirely sure about the whole camera thing. It's really a bit confusing. There we go. That's all like it should be. So we lock on, and then we lock off, and it works. Okay. It just works now. I don't really have an explanation. Maybe it was the wrong conditions. Maybe, I don't know. Like the, yeah, okay. Anyway, it works. Yeah, when it comes to combat, see, we have the normal motion now, right? So I'll try to yeah, there's this small moment where basically you see we warp towards him, but it's really small. So what I'm going to do now on the first one, for the distance, I'm going to set this to 200, doesn't matter, 200. And as you can see, we're just basically, if you set it correctly, if you set it correctly, it will do it right. So it still looks good, don't get me wrong, it does look good, because, you know, we skipped the whole period where he was idle, where he was just standing, and we're only doing the warping and the movement. So that it actually looks awesome. But the problem is, you know, it also takes away a lot of the skill. So for special attacks, this is fine. You know, I mean, not fine, it's almost necessary for special attacks to have something like that in special attacks. However, you don't want it to be something that, you know, that just happens by default with every attack. So that's why we do these 2 meters. And as you can see, it hardly makes it cheating, but we still lock for a bit. Even if we do this right now, so we're not locked in, we're still going to warp that last little step towards him. So that makes it so that in combat we're still targeting, even though we're not literally doing the physical targeting. It will still target towards an enemy. Which solves a lot of the combat workarounds I made for Game Creator 1, which is amazing. It's just a small thing, and that's why, yes, even for the simple light attacks and simple attacks, motion warp is still better than root motion. It's just better. It's really that simple. So really awesome stuff. Whoa, was that timing good? This is good. Oh, we're not doing something right here. I feel like we're doing the wrong order for something. Yeah, we're doing the wrong order for something. Let me quickly fix that. So first we're doing the sword, then we're doing the shield. I mean, that should all be fine, no? Or are we actually even on? Oh, it's because we're doing the wrong we're doing the wrong gesture here. Sorry, this has to be unequip. Unequip 2. I was really confused as to why, because I was so sure this was the right setup. Apologies for that. I was using the wrong animation. Sweet. So before we test this out, the last thing I want to show you is what to do with inventory. And it's, again, you don't have to do any of this, but you know, it's what Breath of the Wild has. It's what Assassin's Creed Odyssey does. The inventory might work different, but system behind it is going to be the same. So we're going to open up our inventory here, our prefab, and on our left hand and right hand slots, these two, we're actually going to remove the on-click unequip. So by default this was unequip. If you look at the close, for example, it's unequip. We're removing that. Then the other thing I'm doing in details, we're also removing the unequip button here, and I've turned it off. Meaning that we can't actually unequip, even though we're not removing the unequip mechanic, which would basically break everything, because then when we switch weapon it's not going to unequip anything. So we're not removing the unequip mechanic, we're just removing any button that allows you to unequip the sword and shield. So I didn't remove it for the armor here, because technically if you don't want to wear any of the clothes, the armor, you know, you should go for the default underwear look we have all the time. I don't really see an issue with that. If you don't want that either, then remove it here as well. However, just like with those games, we always need a sword and a shield equipped. We always need something equipped. And to make sure that we always have that, we also made sure we couldn't drop or sell these default items. We'll be able to sell and drop everything else, just not the default ones, because we always need something, because otherwise it kind of breaks the whole mechanic. So for example, once we start setting up our other archetypes, like the big sword, big axe or whatever, we still have a shield on our back. It's still visually going to be there. Some of them might use this shield, some of them archetypes might not, and this way we can also visually, and also for stats, swap out shields without it breaking the whole mechanic of you know, some archetypes using sword and shield, some not using it. Because if you visually never have one and then it's just going to draw one from thin air, that makes no sense either. So that's the reason why we set it up like this, and that's the reason, you know, those other two games I mentioned before set it up like that as well. Just notice these characters look a bit weird. It's because I forgot to, for now I'm just going to remove them. We know that our targeting looks. Just notice that they're not using the right material. So this is the toon shading one. There we go. That looks better. I was thinking it looked a bit weird. And anyway, so yeah, really, really nice. So that's how we basically set up the basics of our combat. So I'm going to hit play now, and then we'll see if everything is exactly the way it should be. Should be our last try, and everything should be working correctly. So we always have our sword and shield on our back. Really cool. When we open up our inventory, you'll see it's there. You know, the white background, you can change that, whatever. As you can see here, they're equipped. I click on it, nothing happens. You know, I can't unequip them. If I select them, I can't unequip them either. So they're always just going to be there, which I personally just really, you know, it's a solid mechanic. It works, and it makes sure that we don't have any breaking parts in our game. Cool. And then if I draw it, that looks good. Looks good as well. It's not perfect. I think it's damn good. Actually, yeah, it's really nice. And if we lock, you know, we have our cool combos. And yeah, we'll be setting up more attacks, don't worry. It's just these basics required quite the setup, but now that this is set up, setting up more than this is going to be really simple. However, I want to make sure that for the next video we set up how the whole stat stuff works, so you can start adding more and more weapons and shields and whatever to your inventory, so you can, you know, create your loot game. We'll also do the horse mechanic, and I actually want to demonstrate that it actually already is pretty working pretty well. So if I think it was F, right? I only set it up on one side in the video. Yeah, F. So as you can see, yes, the stance is wrong, obviously. However, we can still do melee. And then if we sheath our sword, suddenly it's all good, which shows you that we really do not have to actually change all that much. There's only a couple of small changes we'll need to make, and we can actually have a sword combat on the horse as well. It's going to be really easy to set this up, which is really nice. We'll be using the actual animations from a what's it called, Horse Anim Pro for this, for the sword, you know, the on horse animations. But as you can see, mechanically nothing is actually broken. Mechanically everything works. We just need to set up some masking for the lower body, like we did with the default. Like, you know, when it's you know, when you're not holstering your weapons, basically. We'll need to set up some masking, and also the attack animations will have no motion at all, obviously, and we'll just have masking on the lower body as well, and that's pretty much it. It's going to be pretty simple to set this up. So yeah, I'll do a short video on that, simply because it's just not a lot of work. Luckily, with if you remember the combo, so if you're thinking how we're going to set that up, we can add some conditions there, which is like our horse bull. So yeah, quite a long video, sorry for that, but I really wanted to make sure everything was working correctly, and you know, you understand how everything works. And then you know, for the next video we'll be setting up our stats, and attacks will actually do something. So we'll be setting up the basics of stats, of, you know, defense, attack, some formulas. So yeah, thanks for watching everyone, and I'll see you in the next one.